I used to believe that when a mother grows old, her children would become her anchor, her peaceful shore in the final years of her life. But I was wrong. They didn't throw me out of the house. They only pushed me out of the kitchen, the place where I had fed them all my life. And that hurt more than any wound ever could. That morning, I woke up early, as usual. I was used to rising before dawn, brewing tea, lighting the stove, cooking breakfast for the family. The faint smell of smoke filled the kitchen. The oil sizzled in the pan. Those little sounds reminded me that I still mattered. But just as I ladled soup into a bowl, my daughter-in-law, Linda, walked in. She frowned, her tone sharp. "Mom, you cooked this again? It's too greasy, I can't eat it. And it smells like old food." I froze, my hand still holding the ladle. My son, Ethan, sat at the table, eyes glued to his phone, saying nothing. The entire breakfast passed in silence. When I finally sat down, Linda continued, trying to sound gentle. "Maybe from tomorrow I'll cook, okay, Mom? Your hands shake a lot now. I don't want you to spill or get tired." I looked up, straight into her cold eyes. I didn't say a word. I just placed the ladle on the table, so softly it made no sound, but inside, something shattered. I looked down at my hands. Wrinkled, rough, speckled with age spots. Hands that had chopped vegetables, kneaded dough, peeled fruit, stitched shirts, held my child's hand through fevers. Those same hands were now called shaky and in the way. I remembered when Ethan was little, he used to hold my hand tight during thunderstorms. "Mom, your hands are so warm." Now, he avoided my eyes and only murmured, "Linda just cares about you, Mom. Don't be sad." Sad? No. What I felt was emptiness. That night, I didn't eat dinner. I sat in my room, listening to laughter from the living room. Linda told stories from work. Ethan chuckled softly. Then I heard her say, half joking, half serious, "Honestly, your mom cooks so old-fashioned. I feel heavy after eating." I heard their laughter clearly. I sat still. My hands were trembling, not from age, but from humiliation. In that small room, I opened an old wooden box. Inside was a faded recipe notebook. On the first page, in shaky handwriting, I had written, "Dishes for the ones I love." I flipped through the pages. Chicken soup for Ethan when he's sick. Rice rolls for Linda when she first became my daughter-in-law. Apple pie, my husband's favorite. As I stared at the ink smudged by my tears, I whispered to myself, if they say my hands shake, then I'll let them see what life feels like without these hands. The next morning, I didn't cook breakfast. I didn't make tea either. I just sat on the chair, listening to the chaos in the kitchen. Linda searching for salt, Ethan grumbling about being late for work. I smiled faintly. An almost empty smile. My hands trembled on my lap, but my heart felt strangely calm. They didn't know it yet, but from that day on, this kitchen would be cold. And when the kitchen grows cold, they'll realize what they've lost isn't just a meal, but a mother who once kept their home warm with the very hands they now despise. Before I continue this story, pause for a moment. Have you ever seen your mother's hands tremble while holding a spoon? Have you ever heard her weak voice still asking, "Have you eaten yet?" If you have, then this story is for you. Subscribe to Voices of Auntie Tay, where every episode is a family revenge story filled with tears, betrayal, and awakening. These stories aren't just meant to be heard, they're meant to be felt, remembered, and loved. Every like and comment from you helps us spread lessons about family, gratitude, and the quiet strength of a mother's love. Tell me in the comments where you're listening from, and if you still have your mother by your side, say thank you today. The next morning, the kitchen felt unfamiliar. No clinking spoons, no scent of fried shallots, just dripping water and a pale light through the window. Linda came downstairs, hair still damp, frowning. "Mom, you didn't cook? I have to leave early. No time to order breakfast." I looked up and smiled faintly. "My hands shake. I was afraid I'd spill. You handle it." She froze for a second, then shrugged. Ethan came down next, tie crooked, looking around. "Mom, where's my coffee?" "It's gone. I forgot to buy some," I said softly. The kitchen, once so warm, now felt hollow. They ate a few dry biscuits, drank cold water, and rushed out the door. When it closed behind them, I sat down, touching the table once warm from family meals, now covered in a thin layer of dust. That evening, Linda returned, her voice sharp from the doorway. "Mom, why's the house so messy? You didn't clean?" I looked around a few unwashed bowls, some greens on the counter. My hands shake. I was afraid to break something. She sneered. "Then don't do anything tomorrow. I'll hire someone to clean. This is exhausting." "Shinsri." She said it while scrolling her phone, without even looking at me. Ethan passed by, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Let it go, she's old." But neither of them stopped to ask how I felt. I sat there, staring at my hands, the same hands that had worked from dawn to dusk to raise them, now a burden in my own home. That night, dinner was silent. Linda placed store-bought food on the table, cold cuts, salad, bread. Ethan ate without looking up. I watched quietly, then murmured, "The soup's cold. Let me heat it." Linda quickly cut in. "It's fine, Mom. Don't touch it, you're not used to this electric stove." Her voice was polite, but her eyes were full of disdain. I pulled my hand back, forcing a small smile. From that moment, I understood. They weren't afraid I'd spill the soup. They were afraid I'd touch their world, a world that no longer had room for an old woman's hands. That night, I sat alone in the dark. The ticking clock echoed like the slow heartbeat of someone too tired to feel. I looked at my husband's picture on the altar and whispered, "Do you see it? Our home used to be warm, now it's just smoke and sighs." Tears fell, but I wiped them quickly. I'd cried enough. Tears changed nothing. Those who once needed my protection no longer saw the worth in my sacrifice. The next day, Linda came home from work and saw me trimming vegetables in the backyard. She said loudly, half mocking, "Mom, shouldn't you rest? Why bother with little chores like that? What if you drop the knife with those shaky hands?" I stopped, looked at her, and said quietly, "You know, these hands once chopped thousands of vegetables to feed your husband. These same hands held him when he fell, cooked soup for you after childbirth. Yes, they tremble now, but they never trembled when they loved someone." She said nothing, just turned and walked away. The door closed behind her with a dry click, like the end of something. I sat back on the old wooden chair, gazing at the kitchen through the doorway. It was tidy, spotless, and lifeless. No smoke, no scent, no warmth. I smiled faintly and whispered, "From now on, I'll let the stove grow cold. Let's see who misses it more." I didn't want revenge. I only wanted them to feel the emptiness I once filled every day, with effort, love, and humble meals. I didn't need to shout or rage. Silence was enough. Because sometimes, a mother's silence is the loudest wake-up call in a family asleep in ingratitude. I no longer cook. Not because I'm angry, but because I'm tired. Tired of proving my worth in the home I built with my youth, only to be met with cold eyes and careless words. That morning, I still woke early, as always. Sunlight streamed softly through the window, glinting on the dusty counter. I brewed a weak cup of tea, not caring about breakfast anymore. I heard hurried footsteps, Linda rummaging through the fridge. "Mom, you really didn't cook?" she asked, half annoyed, half surprised. I answered quietly. "My hands shake. I was afraid to spill." She gave me a cold glance, then slammed the fridge door shut. "I'm off to work. Lock the door." Ethan followed, adjusting his crooked tie. He didn't speak, just glanced at me and left. The house fell silent. Only the ticking clock and birdsong from the garden kept me company. I cleaned slowly, swept the floor, then sat on the porch. The breeze carried a faint scent of jasmine. I closed my eyes, remembering the old days when meals meant laughter, warmth, and connection. When Ethan was little, I used to wait for him at the school gate with a warm lunchbox. Each time he ran to me, smiling, holding my hand, I felt like the happiest mother in the world. Now, he only knows work, his phone, and silence. Maybe I really am old. Old people remember the past because it's the only thing that reminds them they still exist. In the evening, Linda came home with a bag of takeout. She placed it on the table, the smell of fried oil filling the kitchen. "Mom, want some?" I got extra. I shook my head. "No, I'm full." In truth, I hadn't eaten all day, just drank water. But hunger of the body isn't as painful as the hunger of being unseen, unloved. After dinner, Linda complained, "The house always feels cold." "I don't get it. Maybe you should keep the heater on all day." I looked at her, wanting to say that the real warmth doesn't come from a heater, it comes from the kitchen, the one she's already extinguished with her contempt. But I stayed silent. Because sometimes, silence lets people hear the echo of their own emptiness. Day by day, the kitchen became foreign. Dust gathered on the shelves, copper pots dulled. No more spoons clinking, no fried shallot aroma, no laughter from the little one waiting for dinner. Ethan and Linda now ate separately. They didn't say it aloud, but I knew they were growing uncomfortable with my absence. One evening, I overheard them arguing. "See, she's doing it on purpose. She's mad. That's why she's so quiet." "Stop it, she's just tired." "Tired? Or trying to make us beg her?" I sat behind the door, each word heavy as stone. No. I didn't want them to beg. I just wanted them to realize, without me, this house is painfully empty. On Sunday, Linda decided to cook. I watched from afar as she fumbled, forgetting salt, burning the pan. Ethan sighed in frustration. "Forget it, I'll just order food." Linda threw the ladle down, eyes glistening with tears. "I don't understand why Mom won't help. She could at least tell me how." I walked up slowly and said, "You don't need to learn how to cook, dear. When you truly want to cook for someone, your hands will know what to do." Then I turned away, each step pressing down on the weight of memory. Behind me, I heard Linda sob softly, and Ethan silent. A silence unlike before, deep, heavy, and full of regret. That night, I went back to my room and opened the old notebook. The smeared handwriting, the simple recipes, and the little note "Ethan likes it mildly spicy" made me want to cry. But I didn't cry anymore. I just closed the notebook gently and whispered, "If they can't remember yet, I'll let memories do it for me." I turned off the light, leaving the house in darkness and the smell of cold food. The kitchen was silent, but inside that silence, a storm was slowly forming. A week passed. The kitchen that once was the warmest place in the house had become a forgotten land. No one wanted to step in there anymore. Only I did, opening the window every morning so sunlight could fall on the still pots, covered with a thin mist of dust. On Saturday morning, I sat by the dining table, listening to my daughter-in-law rummaging in the kitchen. "Goodness, this pan is so sticky. Don't you know a better kind to use?" I answered softly, "In the old days, this one lasted well. You just had to know how to care for it." That, Linda sighed heavily. "What age are we living in? Who still keeps these old things?" I stayed quiet. I didn't want to argue, because anything I said seemed to become a burden in their ears. I just looked at my hands. They still trembled slightly. From age, or from a nameless loneliness, I no longer knew. All day, they didn't speak a word to me. Ethan was busy with work. Linda watched movies in the living room. I sat on the porch, mending an old sweater. The thread snagged around my finger. I tried to free it and chuckled softly. I really am old. When I was young, I used to sew shirts for my husband, patch pants for my son, and make little dishes by hand to make them happy. Now there was only a spool of thread and a rusty needle left. People say when a mother stops caring, a house grows cold by itself. I had begun to see it. In the evening, Linda opened the fridge and complained. "Why is there nothing to eat? You went to the market and didn't buy anything?" I replied gently, "I thought you two liked eating out." She frowned. "Eating out all the time is expensive and boring. Can't you help cook a little?" I turned and looked at her a long moment, then said, "My hands shake. You remember that." My voice was calm, but I saw a flicker of unease in her eyes. Ethan sat at the table, staring down, afraid to speak. The air thickened and heavy, only the ticking clock could be heard in the kitchen. On Sunday, I woke to find them arguing. "I told you, she's doing it on purpose," Linda snapped. "Enough," Ethan answered, tired. "She's old, don't push her." "So what? You want her to do nothing? Just sit there?" Hearing them made my heart sink. The kitchen that once connected us had become the place they used to blame each other. I stepped in and said quietly, "Don't fight. I'm fine. I'm used to silence now." They both looked at me. Linda opened her mouth as if to say something, then only sighed. Ethan gave me a sad glance and lowered his head. At noon, they decided to cook themselves. From the window, I watched Linda fumble with boiling water and dump too much salt into the soup. Ethan forced a smile and tried to eat, face twisted. "Maybe it's a bit salty," he muttered. Linda snapped, I cooked for everyone, no one helped, and now you complain. I just watched, saying nothing. The kitchen became a mirror, reflecting everything. The contempt and the cold gestures they had shown me, now returning to them, while I stood outside it all. And I realized my silence was making them face something they weren't ready for, that when a mother stops caring, the house loses its soul. In the afternoon, I picked some white jasmine from the garden and placed them in a small vase. I heard my grandson call from inside. "Grandma, why doesn't it smell like soup today?" I smiled sadly and replied, "Because the stove is resting, dear." He tilted his head, not understanding, then ran off. But that sentence choked me up. All my life I knew only how to keep the stove warm. Now that I let it cool, my heart cooled with it. Yet somewhere, I felt something, that this chill was beginning to make them realize the true worth of yesterday's warmth. At night, Linda knocked on my door, voice softer. "Mom, tomorrow can you teach me the chicken soup you used to make?" I looked at her calmly. "Chicken soup?" My hands shake. "I probably can't manage." She stayed quiet, lowered her head, and walked away. I closed the door and leaned against the wall. Not happy, not triumphant. Just a quiet sadness spreading, like the old kitchen smoke lingering in a dream. Because I knew, when the kitchen grows cold, no one finds peace in the house. And sometimes, that's the lesson only a silent mother can teach. In the days that followed, the house slowly grew messy, just as I had sensed. No one cleaned the kitchen, the table filled with takeout boxes, the smell of grease clung to everything. Linda was busy and came home late, frowning at the pile of dishes in the sink. Ethan worked until night and barely spoke to anyone. As for me, I just sat in the corner of the living room, quietly hemming old towels. The TV noise, the bickering, the slamming doors, all blended into a chaotic soundtrack I no longer wanted to hear. One evening, Linda dropped onto the sofa with a sigh. "I can't take it anymore. This house is a mess." Ethan kept his eyes on the laptop, voice flat. "I've worked all day. You want me to do housework too? What about Mom? She's home all day and does nothing." The words cut like a knife, but I only smiled, made another stitch, and said nothing. "Mom, I don't mean anything by it, but I'm just saying if you helped a little, everything would be easier," she added, less harshly now. I gave the same answer. "My hands shake, I'm afraid I'll spill things." "Gent." Then I stood up and quietly went to my room, leaving behind their sighs, a sound mixed with fatigue and helplessness. Another morning, I heard my son calling from the kitchen. "Mom, where's the rice cooker? Why won't it turn on?" I replied through the crack in the door. "Probably a loose cord. I used to tie it tighter." He went silent for a moment, then said softly, "I don't know how to tie it." "Toopy." I heard him fiddling with the switch, then a small pop the cooker clicked on, followed by the smell of scorching. "Oh no, it's burning," Linda shouted. I stepped out, looked at the smoking pot, and said quietly, "Cooking is like living together, you have to listen. The rice cooker can't speak, but it warns you before it overheats. People rarely hear that." No one said anything. Ethan turned off the heat. Linda cleaned the pan. I turned away and went back to my usual chair. On Sunday, they ordered pizza for convenience. I watched my grandson take a few bites and put the slice down, whispering, "I don't like pizza. I want Grandma's chicken soup." I froze. My throat tightened. My heart ached as if squeezed. I forced a smile and patted his head. "Grandma's stove is sleeping, dear." He looked at me with clear, sorrowful eyes, then nodded. In that moment, I nearly cried. Not from sadness, but because the child was the only one who still remembered the warmth of my hands. The house grew heavier by the day. Linda was exhausted and stopped smiling. Ethan grew irritable, forgetful, quick to snap. I heard them argue every night, over little things like who didn't take out the trash, who didn't wash the dishes, why the rice burned. But I knew that wasn't why they were fighting. They were fighting because no one was keeping the house warm anymore. The keeper of the stove had stopped tending the fire, and both of them were lost in the darkness they had made. One afternoon, Linda came home early and sat beside me. Softly, without her usual sharpness, she said, "Mom, I'm sorry for the harsh words the other day. I just didn't know if you were truly upset." I smiled and kept stitching the unfinished seam. "I'm not angry at anyone. I'm just learning how to rest." She was quiet, then went into the kitchen. A moment later, I heard the knife on the cutting board, the water boiling, and the clumsy clatter of someone unaccustomed to cooking. Then her voice called out, "Mom, I'm making chicken soup, but I don't know how to season it." I stood and walked to the doorway, watching her struggle. I didn't step in, only said gently, "The cook doesn't need a recipe. Just think of the one you love, and the dish will find its own flavor." Linda froze, eyes brimming red. I turned back to my chair and sat down as before. I knew she had understood, at least a part of it. That night, the house was strangely calm. No arguing, no acrid smell of burnt food. Just a faint aroma of boiled chicken, light and sweet, stirring a distant feeling, peace. I lay quietly, staring at the ceiling, my heart as light as a cloud. They had begun to feel the lack of care, of warmth, of the very hands they once called in the way. I didn't need to say anything more. I just waited. Because I know every child will eventually remember the taste of a mother's love, even in the coldest kitchen. That afternoon was windy. Sunlight slipped through the old curtain, laying honey-colored streaks across the floor. I was in my room, mending a tablecloth, when I heard my little grandchild giggling on the porch. "Grandma, can I play here?" he asked, hugging his teddy bear. I smiled. "Of course, but don't knock over my things." I turned back to my work. A few minutes later, there was a soft thud, then silence. I looked over and saw him sitting on the floor, eyes wide. Beside him was the small wooden box I kept under the table, its lid popped open, old papers and a yellowed notebook scattered across the floor. I stepped over. "Sorry, Grandma, I dropped it," he mumbled. I sat down and patted his head. "It's all right. I'm not angry. These are just my old memories." I picked up the papers. One by one, the thin pages smelled of time. My handwriting from years ago was shaky but neat. "Ginger chicken soup for Ethan when he coughs." "Lafrene," another line. "His father's apple pie, add extra cinnamon." There were ink blots, too, where tears had once fallen. My grandchild asked, curious, "What did you write, Grandma?" I smiled gently. "Recipes so when someone remembers, they'll still know the taste of our home." "Can I keep it, Grandma?" he asked, eyes bright. "You can, but don't forget, inside there aren't just recipes, there is my love." He hugged the notebook and ran to the living room. I watched him go, a strange stirring in my chest. I didn't know that in that moment a child's innocence carried my memories into the middle of a house we thought had gone cold. I heard Ethan ask quietly, "What did you take?" Then my son's voice rose, surprised. "What is this?" I heard pages turning, a long silence, then the quick breaths of someone reading faster and faster. I stepped out and saw Ethan at the table, hands shaking as he held the notebook. He looked at me, eyes red. "Mom, is this yours?" I nodded. "Yes, my notebook. I kept writing every time I cooked for you." He turned more pages, voice tightening. You wrote our names in here." I smiled and looked down at a page, the words blurred with age. "Linda likes tomato soup, go easy on the salt. Ethan only likes mild spice. The little one loves crispy fried eggs." Ethan bit his lip. "I didn't know. You still remembered such small things." I looked at him and spoke slowly. "What mother doesn't? When the hands aren't steady anymore, memory is the one thing we keep to remind ourselves we still love." Linda came downstairs holding the old wooden ladle she used to mock. She paused when she saw her husband and child reading the notebook. Her eyes moved across the pages and stopped at a small sheet where I had pasted my husband's photo with a trembling line beneath it. "These hands have fed you your whole life, Kai." She drew a deep breath and set the ladle on the table. No one spoke. The house was silent, except for the wind hissing through the doorframe and the slow tick of the clock marking the moment something changed forever. After a while, Ethan stood and walked to me. He knelt and took my hands, those wrinkled hands he had avoided before. "Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't know you still wrote, still remembered, still." His voice broke. I rested my hand on his shoulder, as gently as when he was small. I never blamed anyone. It's just that, when people forget the warmth of the stove, sometimes I have to let it cool so they know how warm it used to be. Linda turned away, but I saw her wipe her tears. My grandchild hugged the notebook and looked up, clear and bright. "Grandma, tomorrow can we cook these again?" I smiled, tears falling but my heart light. Yes, I'll teach you tomorrow, but promise me when I'm even older you'll still cook for someone you love. When? That night, for the first time in weeks, I heard the knife lightly tapping the cutting board, water gently boiling, and a ladle stirring soup. I didn't know if they got the taste right, but I knew warmth was returning, little by little from the old notebook, from my trembling hands, and from hearts relearning love through regret. I can't remember the last time my son's eyes were this soft. Maybe when he was little, clinging to me after falling down, crying, "Mom, it hurts." Now the man before me knelt, shoulders shaking not from physical pain, but from late arriving remorse. He held the hands he once called in the way, the hands he'd let others belittle. "Mom, I'm sorry. I'm truly sorry." I looked down and saw his tears fall onto my hands, hot drops, heavy as the sorrow I'd waited years to release. I spoke softly, voice unsteady but calm. "It's all right, son. I'm used to being alone, but I don't want you to get used to it." Ethan looked up, eyes wet. "I forgot that everything in this house is because of you. I thought you were just an old woman. But now I understand without you, this house isn't a home." I smiled. "The house didn't lose its warmth, son. You turned the fire off." He bowed his head. I said nothing more. Some truths must be absorbed in silence. Regret doesn't need words, only enough quiet for a heart to melt. Linda stood at the doorway, fingers interlaced. Her gaze had changed, no longer cold, but shy and tender. "Mom," she whispered, "I'm sorry. I forgot that the one who taught me to cook, to care for others, is you. I thought I was better, more modern, but I lost what mattered most." I saw honesty in her voice and smiled softly. "No one is better than anyone else. The difference is who still remembers how to love." She lowered her head, tears falling. Then she pulled out a chair and said quietly, "Please sit. Ethan and I want to have dinner with you." I was startled. It had been a long time since we ate together. The old wooden table was the same, but tonight it felt different, a bowl of chicken soup steamed in the center. Linda said shyly, "I cooked it. It won't taste like yours." I smelled ginger, scallions, a hint of chili, the scent of our yesterdays. I sat, lifted the spoon. My hand still trembled, but my heart felt warm. I tasted it. The flavor was a little light, the ginger not spicy enough, but there was something I thought I'd never feel again: affection. I nodded. "It's delicious." Linda exhaled and laughed through her tears. Ethan watched me for a long time, then said quietly, "Mom, I promise I won't let the stove go cold again. I'll learn to keep it warm, the way you always did." No one spoke much during that meal. The soft clink of spoons, the wind on the porch, the clock's steady tick all blended into an old tune I'd played 1,000 times in memory. But this time, the melody wasn't sad. It was gentle, warm, and true. I looked at my son, my daughter-in-law, and my little grandchild happily slurping soup, face messy and smiling like sunshine. I realized I didn't need repayment. I only needed them to remember that in every meal, every curl of steam, is the love I poured my life into. After dinner, Ethan washed the dishes and Linda wiped the table. I stood to help, but Linda stopped me. "Let me do it. Your hands need rest." For the first time, those words didn't hurt. They weren't contempt anymore, they were love. I stepped onto the porch. Dusk had fallen, the first stars blinking awake. From the kitchen, warm yellow light spilled out like memory. I whispered to myself, "The flame is lit again, my dear. I've kept it." That night, when the house slept, I wrote in the notebook, "Today, my son remembered the taste of home. I don't need strong hands, only his heart soft again." I closed the notebook, turned off the light, and lay down. In the dark, I heard my heartbeat, slow, warm, and peaceful like the fire in a stove newly kindled, because I knew my silence had done its work. It was never revenge, but a lesson in love, written with a mother's tears. The next morning, I woke earlier than usual, not out of habit, but because I felt something new inside, light, warm, a little fluttering. I went downstairs, and for the first time in weeks, I heard sounds in the kitchen. Not the TV, not arguing, but boiling water, a knife on the cutting board, and soft laughter. I stopped at the doorway, looking through a stripe of light. Linda wore an apron, hair tied up, slicing vegetables. Ethan awkwardly whisked eggs. The little one sat kicking his legs, singing, "Grandma, the kitchen has smoke today." His simple words brought a lump to my throat. I stood there quietly, staring at a scene so ordinary it felt strangely moving. This kitchen, once icy, now had life again. Linda turned and jumped a little when she saw me. "You're up, Mom." "I'm making breakfast. It's clumsy." I smiled and walked in slowly. "It smells good. The greens are a bit dry, add a touch of oil." She nodded and did as I said. Ethan held out a spoon, voice small, like the boy he once was. "Mom, taste it. Tell me if it's like before." I tasted the soft golden eggs. The flavor was rough, but somehow it was good. Good not because of the food, but because of the warmth inside it. That warmth didn't come from the stove. It came from how they were looking at me now with gratitude, not pity. When I sat down, I noticed the table felt different too. No plastic boxes, no takeout. Just white rice, vegetable soup, fried eggs, a few slices of red tomato, simple but tidy. Linda pulled out a chair and said softly, "Please sit in the middle. I want to eat with you." As we ate, no one mentioned blame. No one dredged up the past. We just smiled and shared small stories. The little one fed me a piece of egg and said, "Grandma, eat more so your hands stop shaking." We all laughed. I laughed too, eyes damp. "I'll eat a lot so I can still hold you every day." Linda looked at me, voice tight. "I don't know if you'll forgive me, but thank you. Without your silence, we'd never have realized how wrong we were." I answered softly, "Sometimes silence is the greatest lesson, but it only matters if the learner truly wants to change." Ethan squeezed my hand, voice low. "We'll change, not out of guilt, out of love for you." After breakfast, I cleaned up with Linda. She spoke, light as a breeze. "Mom, I want to learn your chicken soup. Not just the recipe, I want to know how to give a dish a soul like yours." I smiled, rinsing a bowl. "There's no secret. When you cook for someone you love, your hands will know what to do. Don't fear mistakes, only fear cooking without feeling." She stood still and smiled through pressed lips. "I understand. Thank you, Mom." By afternoon, we were watering the garden together. The little one ran around with a tiny watering can. Ethan set the table out on the porch, where the late light turned everything gold. Linda brought a jasmine-scented pot of tea. I looked at them and saw no distance in their eyes. They no longer saw me as a fragile old woman to avoid, but as part of the home they'd once forgotten. That evening, before bed, I opened the old notebook again and wrote a few lines. Today, the kitchen laughed again. Not because I cooked, but because they learned to light the fire for each other. I closed the book and smiled in the dark. My hands still trembled, but this time it was from feeling, not age. I knew the kitchen wouldn't be cold anymore. They had learned how to keep the fire, with the very love I once guarded in silence. The next morning was clear and quiet, like a blessing. I rose early, brewed a pot of tea, and opened the window to let sunlight flood the kitchen. Light spread across the wooden table, over the pots and ladles, everything shining as if waking from a long sleep. I sat and opened the old notebook. The pages were yellowed and curled at the corners, but the words were intact. I traced each line as if touching my own past. Each dish, each note, each small stain of tears or soup. All of it was a piece of my life. I know I've come full circle from being belittled, hurt, and silent to this moment peace. Not because I won, but because in the end, love won. Tiny footsteps pattered over. My grandson hugged his teddy bear, plopped onto the chair, eyes sparkling. "Grandma, what are we cooking today?" I laughed. "What do you want to eat?" "I want the chicken soup from yesterday, but I want to make it myself." Joy rose in me. "Then I'll teach you. But first." I took the notebook and opened to the first page. The edges were worn. I wrote a new line, slowly. "Today, the fire no longer belongs to me alone." I closed the notebook and handed it to him. "It's my gift to you. Someday, when I'm older, keep this fire for me." He took it with both hands, careful, like holding a treasure. "I promise, Grandma." Linda walked into the kitchen, hair tied back, face brighter than it had been in days. "What are you two plotting?" I smiled. "A conspiracy to cook and spread love." "Two." She laughed, then wrapped an arm around my shoulder. "Thank you, Mom. I never knew cooking could make me feel so alive." Ethan came in with the smell of fresh coffee. "And me," he said, resting a hand on my shoulder. "I've never felt our home this warm." I looked at the three of them and smiled. No fancy words, no apologies, no promises. Just their eyes. That was enough to tell me everything was back in its right place. We started cooking. Linda washed the vegetables, Ethan sliced ginger, and I sat nearby to guide them. The little one ran around clumsy but so sweet I couldn't help laughing. Add the scallions when the water boils, too early and the fragrance will fade. "Got it, Mom," Linda chirped, cheerful as a child. "And you, Ethan, stir gently. If you're too rough, the broth will turn cloudy." "Yes, Chef," he joked, and we all laughed. The kitchen filled with voices, laughter, and fragrance. The clink of spoons and chop of knives weren't chores anymore, they were the rhythm of love. When the soup was done, I ladled it into bowls. Steam rose, the scents of ginger and scallions intertwined. I took a spoonful and tasted it. The flavor was balanced, light and sweet, and more than anything, it had something no spice could create, the taste of reunion. "Is it good, Grandma?" the little one asked, eyes shining. I nodded and whispered, "The best in the world." "Are." Ethan handed me a bowl. "Mom, this one is yours." Linda brought a bowl of white rice and said softly, "I think Dad must be smiling in heaven." I looked at my husband's photo on the wall. His smile was as gentle as ever. I whispered, "Do you see it? Our kitchen has smoke again." That afternoon we cleaned up together. I hung the old apron and smoothed its creases. I no longer felt like the one left behind. Partman. I was the keeper of memories, the one who had passed down not just recipes, but a way to hold on to love. Before bed, I wrote on the last page of my notebook, "When a mother goes silent, a family's fire fades. But when they learn to love through action, the flame lights itself again forever." I closed the notebook and set it on the table, calm and at peace. My hands still shook, but my heart was steady. I knew these hands had finished their task, helping a family come back to life. That night, I didn't sleep early. I sat by the window, watched the warm lamp glow through the curtain. Outside, the wind brushed the leaves. Inside, the kitchen still held the soft scents of ginger, scallions, and fresh rice. It had been so long since I felt this at ease. This house had once been silent enough to be frightening. Cold dinners, sharp words, distant looks. All of it once made me feel like an invisible shadow. But in that same silence, I learned to love without speaking, to forgive without needing anyone to ask. I placed a hand over my heart and felt its slow beat. It was weaker than before, but faithful. I thought of my husband, who used to say, "Darling, if I'm ever gone, keep the stove warm, the fire will keep the family." I had done it. There were times I had to let the flame go out. Not because I gave up, but so they could see how precious warmth really is. You can't understand light unless you've walked through the dark. The next morning, Ethan brewed coffee, Linda baked pastries. Laughter bubbled from the kitchen, the sound I thought I'd never hear again. My grandson ran into my room, notebook in hand. "Grandma, can I write more?" I smiled. "What will you write?" "I'll write, 'Our kitchen's fire will never go out.'" I laughed, tears spilling before I could stop them. "Good boy." Done. At noon, Linda brought me a small box wrapped in brown paper. "Please open it, Mom." I untied the string. Inside was a pair of soft beige fabric gloves. "So you can cook without fear of burns. But really, I just want you to cook with us every week." I was stunned. Her words were light as a breeze, but they made my heart tremble like a child's. "Thank you, but now I just want to watch. Just seeing the kitchen smoke is enough." Linda smiled, eyes red. "But the kitchen is truly warm when you're standing there." Ethan stepped up and hugged my shoulders. "Mom, I've never said this. When you went silent, I thought you'd let go. I didn't understand your silence was for me to grow. Thank you for not leaving." I placed my hand over his chest, his heartbeat strong like when he was little. "I never left, son. I only stepped back so you could learn to keep the fire." In the afternoon, we sat together on the porch. The breeze was soft, sunshine touched our hair, and jasmine tea perfumed the air. I looked at them 3 generations, talking and laughing, hands joined. Simple, yes, but to me, it was a miracle. I understood that every wound will heal if people are willing to sit together. Every silence will speak if hearts still want to listen. And every cold kitchen can grow warm again if love is great enough to relight the flame. That evening, I wrote a few more lines in my notebook, now filled with the handwriting of my grandson, of Linda, of Ethan. 3 generations, 3 different scripts in one book. Looking at it felt like seeing our family's soul, linked by each stroke of ink. I wrote the final line, my letters trembling. People say revenge is making others hurt. But to me, the most beautiful revenge is teaching them how to love. I set down the pen and smiled softly. No applause, no bright lights, only the kitchen's warmth and the quiet beat of my heart. Before turning off the light, I looked at the kitchen one more time. The yellow lamp glowed. A thread of steam rose from the warm pot Linda had left on the stove. I spoke into the stillness. Thank you, dear kitchen. Thank you for teaching me how to love again. Then I went to my room and closed the door gently. My hands still shook, but my heart warmer than ever. Because I know the flame will go on, whether I'm here or not. And that is the most beautiful thing a mother can leave to the world. You've just listened to a story not only about a mother's silence, but about how love can heal what seemed shattered beyond repair. Sometimes a mother doesn't need to say a word to teach the greatest lesson. She only has to stop cooking, stop calling, and let the kitchen go cold, so the world around her finally sees what truly keeps a house a home. If you still hear the clink of bowls and chopsticks every evening, if you still see the kitchen light on when you come home late, cherish the one standing there, because that person is keeping your heart warm. Thank you for listening to today's Family Revenge Stories. Don't forget to subscribe to Voices of Auntie Tay and leave a comment telling me where you're listening from. Because sometimes, a single message from you can warm another heart.